Picture this. A pregnant woman collapses in a packed courtroom while thousands watch the live stream. Her husband doesn't even flinch. His beautiful young mistress sitting in the gallery. She's actually smiling and posting about it to her 2 million Instagram followers in real time. But here's what nobody in that courtroom knew. This wasn't just a messy divorce. This was the culmination of the most sophisticated digital assassination ever attempted against a pregnant woman. Using cutting-edge artificial intelligence, a tech mogul had spent months systematically destroying his wife's life, creating fake evidence so convincing that even her own mother started to doubt her. The mistress thought she'd won. The husband thought he'd covered every angle. The judge thought she was dealing with a simple infidelity case. They were all wrong. What happened next exposed a multi-million-dollar criminal empire, led to federal legislation, and changed how we think about artificial intelligence forever. But it started with one woman refusing to let lies destroy her child's future, even when those lies were created by technology so advanced it fooled almost everyone. This is the true story of how deep-fake technology was weaponized in a divorce court, how a pregnant woman fighting for her life uncovered a nationwide conspiracy, and why the FBI ended up raiding a tech company that claimed to be fighting the very crimes they were actually committing. By the end of this story, you'll never look at social media the same way again. The courtroom fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of Sarah Martinez's phone as notifications flooded in. She lay crumpled on the polished marble floor, 7 months pregnant, her designer maternity dress spread around her like a wilted flower. Above her, the live stream camera continued rolling, broadcasting her humiliation to thousands of viewers in real time. Pregnant wife down, mistress laughing. Read one comment racing across the screen. Another said, "This is better than Netflix." The comments multiplied faster than anyone could read them. Across the courtroom gallery, Amber Sterling sat perfectly composed, her glossy lips curved in a satisfied smirk. Her 2 million Instagram followers were watching this unfold live, and she knew exactly how this looked. The wronged wife collapsed while the beautiful young mistress maintained her poise. It was perfect content. Jake Harrison, Sarah's husband of 8 years, remained seated at the defendant's table. He didn't move toward his pregnant wife. He didn't call for help. He simply adjusted his Rolex and whispered something to his lawyer that made the man nod approvingly. "Mrs. Martinez needs medical attention," Judge Patricia Williams announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Court is recessed until the paramedics clear her for continuation." As the bailiffs helped Sarah to her feet, her vision swimming back into focus, she caught sight of Amber's phone. The influencer was already posting to her Instagram story, typing rapidly with perfectly manicured nails. The caption would read something about karma and divine justice. Sarah was certain. The paramedic's voice seemed far away as he asked about her blood pressure and stress levels. Sarah's mind was stuck on one image, Amber's triumphant smile as she posted content about Sarah's lowest moment to millions of strangers. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. 3 months ago, Sarah had believed she was living the American dream. 3 months earlier, Sarah Martinez stood in the marble kitchen of their Austin smart home, holding a positive pregnancy test with trembling hands. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the Tesla Model S in their circular driveway and the infinity pool beyond. Everything about their life screamed success. Jake's tech company, Harrison Digital Empire, had just closed a $50 million Series C funding round. Sarah's Instagram feed was a carefully curated showcase of their perfect life date nights at Austin's hottest restaurants. Weekend trips to their lake house, designer everything. She had planned the pregnancy announcement for weeks, reservations at Jake's favorite steakhouse, a custom onesie that read, "Future CEO," wrapped in tissue paper, even a photographer hidden nearby to capture his reaction for their social media. But when Jake walked into the kitchen that morning, fresh from his home gym workout, something felt different. He was scrolling through his phone with an intensity that made her stomach flutter nervously. "Jake," she said softly, holding up the test. "We're having a baby." He looked up from his screen, his blue eyes focusing on the plastic stick in her hand. For a moment, his expression was completely blank. Then his jaw tightened. "Now, really?" His voice was flat, almost annoyed. "This is terrible timing with the IPO planning." Sarah felt the words hit her like a physical blow. "I thought you'd be happy. We talked about starting a family." We talked about it eventually. Sarah, after the company goes public, after we establish real wealth, he set down his protein shake with more force than necessary. Do you have any idea how much a pregnancy affects company valuations? Investors see family obligations as distractions. I'm not an obligation, Sarah whispered, but Jake was already heading toward his home office. Phone pressed to his ear. Marcus, yeah, it's Jake. We need to talk about the timeline. Sarah stood alone in their perfect kitchen, the positive test feeling heavy in her palm. This wasn't the reaction she had dreamed about during the sleepless nights when she had imagined sharing this news. Where was the joy, the excitement, the overwhelming love she had expected? She looked down at her still flat stomach and made a silent promise. No matter what Jake thought about timing, she would love this baby enough for both of them. But as the days passed, Jake's coldness only deepened. He worked later hours, traveled more frequently, and when he was home, he seemed to look through her rather than at her. Their conversations became transactional grocery lists, bill payments, calendar coordination. The romantic dinners stopped, the weekend getaways ended. Even their Instagram posts became less frequent, though Sarah maintained the facade for their friends and followers. Pregnant and glowing, she captioned photos of herself alone in their beautiful spaces, always mentioning how supportive Jake was, even when he was nowhere to be seen. It was during one of those lonely evenings, while Jake was supposedly at another late investor meeting, that Sarah made a discovery that would shatter her world completely. She had been using Jake's laptop to update their joint calendar when a browser notification popped up. A message from OnlyFans, addressed to an account she didn't recognize. Curious and suspicious, she clicked on the notification. The screen that loaded made her blood freeze. Jake's account showed a subscription history that went back months. Hundreds of dollars spent on explicit content from dozens of creators. But one name appeared far more frequently than the others, with payments that made her stomach lurch. Amber Sterling, $10,000 in the last month alone. Sarah's hands shook as she clicked on Amber's profile. The woman was everything Sarah wasn't 26 years old. Bleach blonde hair, surgically enhanced curves, and a bio that read, "Your favorite Texas fantasy." Her content was explicit, designed to make men feel like they had a personal relationship with her. But it was the private messages that destroyed Sarah completely. Months of conversation between Jake and Amber. Intimate details about their life that Jake had shared with a stranger selling sexual content. Complaints about Sarah's mood swings and neediness. Plans for meetups when Jake was supposedly at business conferences. The worst message was only 3 days old. Jake had written, "She's pregnant now." Even more clingy and emotional. "I need our chats more than ever." Amber's response, "Poor baby. Maybe it's time to upgrade to a woman who actually appreciates what she has." Sarah closed the laptop and ran to the bathroom, vomiting until her throat burned. When she emerged, Jake was home, loosening his tie and talking animatedly on his phone about quarterly projections. He looked at her pale face with mild concern. "You okay? You look sick. I found your OnlyFans account." The words came out steadier than she felt. Jake's expression didn't change immediately. He finished his phone conversation, said goodbye to whoever was on the line, and then looked at her with eyes that had gone completely cold. "You went through my personal accounts." "Personal accounts?" Sarah's voice rose. "You're spending our money on another woman while I'm pregnant with your child. It's entertainment. Sarah, it's not real." His tone was condescending, the way he might explain a simple concept to a child. "You're being hormonal." "Hormonal?" The word came out as a shriek. "You're having emotional affairs with sex workers, and I'm being hormonal. See, this is exactly what I mean." Jake walked past her toward the stairs. "You're being irrational and dramatic. It's just content consumption. No different than watching porn." But Sarah had seen the messages. She knew it was much more than content consumption. Jake had formed a relationship with Amber Sterling, built on their shared disdain for the pregnant wife who was ruining his perfectly curated life. That night, Jake slept in the guest room for the first time in their marriage. He claimed he needed space to think, but Sarah knew the truth. He needed space to message his online girlfriend without interruption. As she lay alone in their king-size bed, Sarah felt the baby move for the first time, a tiny flutter that should have been magical. Instead, it felt like a reminder that she was trapped in a life that no longer wanted her. The perfect Instagram life she had built was revealed to be nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. And the man she had loved for 8 years had found his replacement before he even bothered to tell her their marriage was over. Sarah's baby shower should have been the highlight of her pregnancy. She had planned every detail, meticulously pink and gold decorations, a dessert table from Austin's most exclusive bakery, and 30 of her closest friends gathered in their beautifully landscaped backyard. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was celebrating new life while her marriage was dying. In the 2 weeks since discovering Jake's OnlyFans obsession, they had barely spoken. He had moved permanently into the guest room, claiming Sarah's pregnancy insomnia was disrupting his sleep schedule. But for one afternoon, Sarah allowed herself to pretend everything was normal. She wore a flowing pink dress that accentuated her growing belly and smiled for the dozens of photos her friends insisted on taking. Her Instagram story was full of grateful posts about feeling blessed and surrounded by love. "You look absolutely radiant," gushed her friend Monica, snapping yet another picture. "Jake must be so excited. He's over the moon," Sarah lied smoothly. "He's just busy with the IPO preparation. You know how these tech guys get during funding rounds." The gifts were beautiful and expensive, befitting their social circle of young Austin professionals. Designer baby clothes, a luxury stroller system, and a bassinet that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sarah opened each present with enthusiasm she didn't feel, knowing that Jake's absence was being noticed by everyone present. "Where is the proud papa anyway?" asked her neighbor Jessica, looking around the party. "Shouldn't he be here documenting every moment? He had an emergency investor call," Sarah replied, the lie coming easier each time. "He's devastated to miss it, but you know how these opportunities are. He'll make it up to us later." But as if summoned by her deception, Jake appeared in the backyard doorway. He was dressed in his best suit, the one he wore to the most important meetings, and he was carrying a manila envelope. Sarah's heart fluttered with hope. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he was here to surprise her, to show their friends that he was committed to their growing family. Maybe the envelope contained some romantic gesture or baby-related surprise. "Ladies," Jake said, his voice carrying across the party with practiced charm. "Sorry to interrupt such a beautiful celebration." The conversations died down as 30 women turned to look at the handsome tech mogul. Several of Sarah's friends pulled out their phones to capture what they assumed would be a sweet moment. Jake walked directly to Sarah, his expression unreadable. When he was close enough that only she could hear, he whispered, "I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Then, in front of 30 witnesses and countless smartphone cameras, he handed her the manila envelope. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The first document was titled Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. Her name was listed as the respondent. Jake Harrison versus Sarah Martinez Harrison. The world seemed to tilt sideways. She looked up at Jake, who was watching her with clinical detachment, as if he were observing an interesting business transaction rather than destroying his pregnant wife in front of their entire social circle. "Jake, what is this?" she whispered, though she knew exactly what it was. "I'm filing for divorce. Sarah, I think it's best for both of us." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone's champagne glass slipped from their hand and shattered on the stone patio. Sarah heard Monica gasp audibly. She could feel 30 pairs of eyes staring at her, 30 phones probably still recording. "You're serving me divorce papers at my baby shower." Sarah's voice was barely audible, but in the complete silence, everyone heard her. "I thought it was better to be direct. We've been having problems, and with the baby coming, I think we need to establish clear boundaries and expectations." Sarah looked down at the legal documents, her vision blurring with tears. Through her shock, certain phrases jumped out at her, irreconcilable differences. "Contested paternity. Temporary restraining order. Contested paternity," she read aloud, her voice growing stronger with anger. "You're questioning whether this baby is yours." Jake's expression remained neutral, but she caught a flicker of something calculated in his eyes. "Given the circumstances of our relationship deterioration, I think it's reasonable to establish biological parentage through proper legal channels." The assembled women began murmuring among themselves. Sarah could hear fragments of whispered conversations, paternity test. Affair. Poor Jake. The narrative was already being written, and Jake was positioning himself as the victim. What circumstances? Sarah demanded, standing up despite her growing belly making the movement awkward. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. Sarah, I'm simply saying that a lot has changed in our relationship, and I think we need professional guidance to sort through the complications. He was being deliberately vague, letting the assembled crowd draw their own conclusions about Sarah's fidelity. She realized with horrible clarity that this was all calculated. The timing, the audience, the carefully neutral language that nonetheless painted her as an unfaithful wife. Her friend Monica stepped forward tentatively. Maybe you two should discuss this privately. No, Jake said firmly. Sarah deserves to have her support system here. I know this is difficult, but I think transparency is important. Transparency. As if Jake Harrison knew anything about transparency. As if the man who had been secretly funding another woman's explicit content for months while his wife was pregnant had any right to talk about honesty. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. The shock was being replaced by a cold, clear anger that cut through her pregnancy hormones like a blade. You want transparency, Jake? She held up the legal documents. Let's be transparent. Should I tell everyone here about your OnlyFans addiction, about the $10,000 you've spent on Amber Sterling while I've been carrying your child? Jake's practiced composure cracked for just a moment. Several women gasped at the mention of OnlyFans, and Sarah heard someone whisper, "Oh my God." But Jake recovered quickly. Sarah, you're upset, and you're saying things that aren't accurate. This is exactly why I think we need professional mediation. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that Sarah almost doubted herself for a moment. Almost, but she had seen the messages, the payments, the intimate conversations with a woman who sold fantasy relationships to married men. Ladies, I think we should give them some privacy, Monica announced, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. The party guests began gathering their purses and making awkward exit comments about hoping everything works out and being there if Sarah needed anything. But Sarah noticed how many of them hugged Jake goodbye, how many offered him their sympathy and support. Within 15 minutes, the backyard was empty except for Sarah and Jake, surrounded by the remnants of her baby shower. Pink streamers hung sadly from the trees, and expensive baby gifts sat unopened on the gift table. That was cruel, even for you, Sarah said once they were alone. I gave you a chance to handle this privately. You chose not to take it. Jake loosened his tie, looking relieved that his performance was over. My lawyers advised me that serving you in front of witnesses would help establish the timeline and prevent any claims that you weren't properly notified. Your lawyer? Sarah laughed bitterly. Of course you've already lawyered up. While I was planning a baby shower, you were planning to destroy my life. I'm not trying to destroy anything. Sarah, I'm trying to protect myself and my company from a situation that's become untenable. Your child is a situation. Jake looked at her with something that might have been pity. Sarah, you know as well as I do that this marriage has been over for months. We're just making it official. As he walked back toward the house, leaving her alone with the divorce papers and the scattered remains of her celebration, Sarah felt the first real kick from her baby, strong and insistent, as if the child inside her was reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight. She looked around at the expensive decorations, the untouched gift bags, the champagne glasses abandoned on tables throughout the yard. Tomorrow, photos from this disaster would be all over social media. The story would spread through Austin's tech community like wildfire. Jake Harrison's pregnant wife, served with divorce papers at her own baby shower. But as Sarah sat there among the ruins of her perfect life, she made a decision that would define everything that came next. She wasn't going to be the victim in Jake's carefully constructed narrative. She was going to fight back. The war for her future and her child's future was just beginning. Sarah's first instinct was to call her mother in Phoenix, but the conversation went worse than she could have imagined. Linda Martinez had always adored Jake, frequently mentioning to friends how proud she was that her daughter had married such a successful man. Honey, are you sure you're not overreacting? Linda's voice crackled through the phone. Pregnancy hormones can make everything seem more dramatic than it really is. Maybe Jake just needs some space to process becoming a father. Suckanot, Mom, he served me divorce papers at my baby shower, in front of 30 people. Men handle stress differently, sweetheart. And you said he's been working on some big business deal. Maybe he's just overwhelmed. Sarah felt like she was drowning. Even her own mother was making excuses for Jake's behavior. He's been spending thousands of dollars on another woman's explicit content. This isn't about work stress. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Sarah, I think you need to be very careful about making accusations like that. Jake has worked hard to build his reputation. If you start spreading rumors about his private life, it could hurt both of you financially. The conversation ended with Sarah feeling more isolated than ever. If her own mother wouldn't support her, who would her friends from the baby shower had been texting throughout the week? But their messages were careful and neutral. Thinking of you during this difficult time. Here if you need anything. Hope you're taking care of yourself and the baby? No one directly asked what had happened or offered to help her fight Jake's accusations. Sarah realized with growing horror that Jake's public ambiguity about their marriage problems was working exactly as he had intended. By not making specific accusations, he had allowed their social circle to assume the worst about her while maintaining his own reputation as the reasonable, successful husband dealing with a difficult wife. It was during this lowest point that Sarah met Diane Cooper. Diane's law office was nothing like the sleek corporate spaces Sarah was used to visiting with Jake. Located in a converted house in East Austin, it felt more like a living room than a legal practice. Diane herself was a woman in her mid-40s with prematurely gray hair and tired eyes that somehow conveyed both warmth and steel. "I've been following your husband's company," Diane said after Sarah had explained her situation. "Harrison Digital Empire has an interesting business model, very focused on artificial intelligence and digital content creation. Jake always said they were revolutionizing how people interact with digital media," Sarah replied, unsure why this was relevant to her divorce. "I'm sure he did." Diane made a note on her legal pad. "Tell me about these OnlyFans payments. Do you have documentation?" Sarah pulled out printed screenshots she had taken before Jake changed all his passwords. The evidence was damning: months of payments to Amber Sterling, intimate messages, and clear evidence of an emotional affair. "This is excellent," Diane said, studying the documents. "Financial infidelity, especially during pregnancy, will play very well with a judge, and these messages show a pattern of emotional abuse and gaslighting." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "So we can fight this. We can absolutely fight this. In fact, I think we can do more than just defend against his divorce petition. I think we can go on the offense." Diane explained her strategy. They would file a counter-petition alleging financial misconduct, emotional cruelty, and abandonment during pregnancy. The OnlyFans payments could be characterized as dissipation of marital assets. The public nature of the divorce filing could be framed as intentional humiliation designed to isolate Sarah from her support system. "What about his paternity challenge?" Sarah asked. "That's actually good for us," Diane replied. "Challenging paternity without evidence makes him look petty and cruel. We'll agree to the test immediately, which will make us look confident and transparent while making him look paranoid." Sarah left Diane's office feeling better than she had in months. Finally, someone was taking her side. Finally, she had a plan. The paternity test was scheduled for the following week. Sarah approached it with complete confidence. She had been faithful throughout their marriage, even during the lonely months when Jake had been emotionally absent. The test would prove the baby was his, and hopefully, it would make Jake look foolish for even questioning it. The day before the test, Sarah decided to do something she hadn't done in weeks. She posted on Instagram. The photo was a mirror selfie showing her growing belly, with a caption about choosing joy during difficult times and trusting that truth always wins. The response was immediately overwhelming. Hundreds of likes and comments poured in from friends, acquaintances, and even strangers who had apparently heard about her situation. The support felt genuine and warm, reminding Sarah that she wasn't as alone as she had felt. But the next morning, everything changed. Sarah woke up to her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Not the supportive messages she had expected, but something much worse. Her Instagram mentions were filled with tags linking to other social media accounts, all showing the same type of content: photos of Sarah that she had never taken, videos of her in compromising situations that had never happened, all of them explicit, all of them clearly showing her face, and all of them obviously designed to make her look like she was having affairs with multiple men. The images were sophisticated enough to fool a casual observer, but fake enough that anyone who knew Sarah well would recognize the impossibility of the situations depicted. Her face had been digitally mapped onto other women's bodies with stunning precision. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through post after post. The fake content was spreading across multiple platforms: Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and various forums. Someone had clearly spent significant time and resources creating an entire alternate version of her life, one where she was the unfaithful, sexually promiscuous wife that Jake was implying she had become. Her phone rang. It was Diane. "Sarah, we have a problem." Diane's voice was tense. "Jake's legal team just delivered new evidence to support their paternity challenge. They have photos and videos that allegedly show you with other men." "Those are fake," Sarah said immediately. "I've never done any of those things. Those aren't even my body." "I believe you, but they're very convincing. Someone with serious technical skills created these. We're going to need digital forensics experts to prove they're manipulated, and that's going to be expensive and time-consuming." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. "Diane, I can't afford expensive experts. Jake froze our joint accounts. I'm living off my savings." "There's something else," Diane continued. "These images are all over social media now. Your employer is probably going to see them. Your family, your friends. Even if we can prove they're fake eventually, the damage to your reputation is immediate." As if summoned by Diane's prediction, Sarah's phone started ringing with a call from her boss at the tech startup where she worked as a marketing director. "Sarah, I need you to come in immediately." Brad's voice was strained. "We need to discuss your social media presence and how it's affecting the company's reputation." Sarah had built her entire career on her professional reputation and social media expertise. She had been the face of several successful marketing campaigns, had spoken at conferences about authentic brand building, and had cultivated a personal brand based on integrity and family values. Now, in the span of a single morning, all of that was being destroyed by images that she had never posed for, in situations she had never been in, with men she had never met. The sophistication of the fake content was terrifying. Whoever had created it had access to high-end artificial intelligence tools and deepfake technology. They had studied her social media presence carefully enough to place her digitally in locations she actually visited, making the images seem plausible to anyone who didn't know her intimately. But Sarah was beginning to suspect she knew exactly who had access to that kind of technology, and who would benefit from destroying her credibility just as their divorce was beginning. Jake's company, Harrison Digital Empire, specialized in AI-powered content creation and digital media manipulation. Their website boasted about their cutting-edge deepfake detection technology and their ability to create photorealistic digital content for entertainment and commercial purposes. If Jake wanted to destroy her reputation and make himself look like the victim of an unfaithful wife, he had every tool he needed right at his fingertips. As Sarah drove to what she suspected would be her termination meeting, she realized that Jake had played her perfectly. He had convinced her to fight his divorce petition, knowing that she would have to expose herself to public scrutiny to do it. He had encouraged her to take the paternity test, knowing that he was about to release fake evidence that would make her look guilty regardless of the biological results. She had thought she was going on the offensive, but she had actually walked directly into a trap that had been months in the making. The war for her future was far from over, but she was losing the first major battle in spectacular fashion. Sarah's termination meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. Brad Morrison, her boss at TechFlow Marketing, couldn't make eye contact as he slid a severance package across the conference room table. "This is a young company. Sarah, we can't afford association with this kind of scandal." His voice was apologetic but firm. "The board met this morning. The decision is final." "Brad, those images are fake. I've never done anything like what's shown in those photos." "I know you, Sarah. I believe they're probably fake." Brad finally looked at her directly. "But believing it and proving it are two different things. Our biggest client called this morning. They're threatening to pull their account if we don't distance ourselves from the controversy." Sarah understood the business logic, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. She had helped build TechFlow's social media presence from nothing. Her campaigns had directly contributed to their recent growth and success. "What about my maternity leave, my health insurance? The severance package includes COBRA coverage for 6 months. After that," Brad shrugged helplessly. As Sarah cleaned out her office, Her former colleagues avoided her gaze. Some looked sympathetic, but no one spoke to her directly. The fake scandal had made her radioactive in professional circles. Driving home, Sarah's phone buzzed constantly with notifications she was afraid to read. The deep-fake images had gone viral overnight, shared and reshared across multiple platforms. People were dissecting them, debating their authenticity, and speculating about her character with the casual cruelty that social media enabled. A trending hashtag had emerged, "Rusher, faithful wife or fake." Users were posting side-by-side comparisons of Sarah's real social media presence and the explicit fake images, treating her personal crisis like an entertaining puzzle to solve. The worst part was the comments from people who knew her in real life. High school classmates, college friends, and professional acquaintances were all weighing in with their opinions about whether the real Sarah was capable of the behavior depicted in the fakes. "I always thought she was too perfect," wrote someone from her college sorority. "This makes more sense." "Poor Jake," commented a neighbor. "He seemed like such a devoted husband." Each comment felt like a physical blow. Sarah had spent years building genuine relationships in authentic personal brands, only to watch it all crumble based on lies created by artificial intelligence. When she arrived home, there were 3 news vans parked outside their house. Reporters approached her car before she could get to the front door. "Mrs. Harrison, can you comment on the allegations of infidelity? Are you planning to fight for custody of your child? What do you say to people who claim these images prove your husband's concerns about paternity?" Sarah pushed through the crowd without commenting, but she knew her flustered appearance would be broadcast as evidence of guilt. Everything she did or didn't do was being interpreted through the lens of the fake narrative Jake had created. Inside the house, Jake was waiting in the living room with 2 men in expensive suits. Sarah recognized one as Robert Sterling, Jake's corporate attorney. The other man was unfamiliar but had the same predatory confidence. "Sarah, this is Marcus Webb, my family law attorney," Jake said casually, as if introducing a dinner guest rather than the man hired to destroy her legal position. "We were hoping to discuss a settlement," Marcus said smoothly. "Given the new evidence that's emerged, we think it would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter quickly and quietly." Sarah's pregnancy fatigue was overwhelming, but she forced herself to focus. "I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present." "Of course," Marcus replied, "but perhaps you'd like to hear the terms we're prepared to offer. Given the current circumstances, the settlement offer was insulting. Jake would retain full ownership of Harrison Digital Empire and all their major assets. Sarah would receive a modest cash payment and temporary spousal support that would end if she remarried or cohabited with anyone. Most significantly, Jake would have primary custody of their child, with Sarah receiving limited visitation rights. This is based on the assumption that paternity is established," Marcus explained. "If the child isn't biologically Mr. Harrison's, then obviously custody arrangements would be different." Sarah felt like she was drowning. "Those images are fake. Jake knows they're fake because his company has the technology to create them." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation. Mrs. Harrison, do you have evidence to support that claim?" "Harrison Digital Empire specializes in deepfake technology." "They specialize in deepfake detection and prevention," Marcus corrected. "Their technology is used to identify and stop exactly the kind of fake content you're claiming victimized you." The irony was suffocating. Jake's company could create undetectable fake content and then profit from selling the tools to detect it. It was the perfect cover for exactly the kind of digital assassination he had orchestrated against her. After the lawyers left, Jake remained in the living room while Sarah collapsed on the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. "You could make this easy on both of us," he said quietly. "Take the settlement. Start fresh somewhere else." "With our child. With your child," Jake corrected. "We'll know soon enough whose child it actually is." Sarah looked at her husband of 8 years, the man she had once loved completely, and realized she was looking at a stranger. The Jake she had married would never have done this to anyone, let alone his pregnant wife. Either he had changed completely, or she had never really known him at all. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Jake considered her question seriously, as if genuinely trying to explain his reasoning. "Because you stopped being useful," he said finally. "When we got married, you were an asset, smart, beautiful, connected in the right circles. But you became needy and demanding. The pregnancy made it worse. I need a partner who enhances my success, not someone who holds me back. I gave up my career to support yours. You gave up a mediocre marketing job. I built a $50 million company. Jake's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing stock prices. Your contributions were minimal, and your current emotional state makes you a liability. Sarah felt something break inside her chest, some final thread of connection to the man she had loved. So you decided to destroy me instead of just divorcing me normally. I decided to protect my interests. If you had agreed to a quiet separation, none of this would have been necessary. But you chose to fight me. Sarah, you chose to make this public and messy. I chose to defend myself against false accusations. Jake shrugged. The accusations weren't false until you made them false. Your social media history, your emotional instability, your increasingly erratic behavior, all of that painted a picture of a woman capable of infidelity. I just made sure the picture was complete. The casual admission of guilt was breathtaking. Jake wasn't even trying to maintain the pretense of innocence anymore. He was explaining his strategy like a business presentation. People will figure out the truth eventually, Sarah said. Will they? Jake pulled out his phone and showed her the trending hashtags. Social media has already decided you're guilty. Digital forensics might prove the images are fake, but that will take months and cost money you don't have. By then, the divorce will be final, custody will be established, and I'll be married to someone who actually appreciates what I can offer. Sarah's blood went cold. You're planning to marry Amber. Amber understands the value of discretion and loyalty. She won't embarrass me at investor meetings or make demands about work-life balance. Jake stood up, checking his Rolex. She's also not pregnant with complications that could affect my company's public offering. As Jake headed toward the stairs, Sarah realized the full scope of his plan. This wasn't just about ending their marriage. It was about completely erasing her from his narrative. He wanted to rewrite their entire relationship history so that he emerged as the successful entrepreneur who had been victimized by an unstable, unfaithful wife. The fake images weren't just designed to help him win the divorce. They were designed to ensure that no one would ever believe Sarah's version of events, no matter what evidence she eventually produced. But as Sarah sat alone in the living room of the house they had built together, feeling her baby move inside her, she made a decision that would define everything that came next. Jake Harrison had made one crucial mistake in his perfectly planned digital assassination. He had assumed that Sarah would break under the pressure, that she would accept his settlement and disappear quietly from his life. He had underestimated the fury of a woman who had nothing left to lose except her child. And he was about to learn that fury, properly directed, could be more powerful than all the artificial intelligence in the world. The first catastrophic event happened at 2:37 in the morning, exactly 1 week after Sarah lost her job. She woke up in a pool of blood. The cramping had started around midnight, sharp pains that cut through her lower abdomen like knives. Sarah had experienced some discomfort throughout her pregnancy, but this was different. This was her body rebelling against the stress that had consumed her life for weeks. She called out for Jake, forgetting for a moment that he had been sleeping in the guest room since serving her divorce papers. When he didn't respond, she stumbled down the hallway and pounded on his door. "Jake, something's wrong with the baby." She heard movement inside the room, but the door didn't open immediately. When it finally did, Jake appeared fully dressed despite the late hour, his phone pressed to his ear. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, then looked at Sarah with annoyed concern. "What's wrong now?" "I'm bleeding. We need to get to the hospital." Jake's expression shifted to something that might have been worry, but Sarah couldn't be sure if he was concerned about her or about how a miscarriage might affect his legal strategy. The emergency room at Austin General was busy, despite the early hour. Sarah sat in the waiting area, cramping and terrified, while Jake paced nearby making phone calls. She could hear fragments of his conversations, crisis management, public relations impact, liability concerns. Even in the middle of her medical emergency, Jake was treating her potential miscarriage as a business problem to be managed. Dr. Patricia Valdez, the on-call obstetrician, was kind but direct. The ultrasound showed that Sarah was experiencing a partial placental abruption, likely caused by severe stress. The baby was still alive, but Sarah would need to be on strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. Any additional stress could cause complete abruption, Dr. Valdez explained. That would be life-threatening for both you and the baby. Jake received this news with visible frustration. How long is strict bed rest? Until delivery, Mrs. Harrison needs complete rest, minimal physical activity, and absolutely no emotional stress. Sarah almost laughed at the impossibility of that prescription. She was in the middle of the most stressful situation of her life, with no job, no income, and a husband actively trying to destroy her reputation and steal custody of their child. That's not practical, Jake told the doctor. She's involved in complex legal proceedings. She has obligations. Dr. Valdez looked between them with growing concern. Mr. Harrison, your wife's life and your baby's life are at risk. Nothing is more important than managing that risk. Marona, but Sarah could see in Jake's eyes that he was calculating how her medical restrictions might affect his legal strategy. If she was confined to bed rest, she couldn't actively participate in her own defense. She couldn't meet with lawyers, gather evidence, or fight his accusations. The second catastrophic event occurred 3 days later. Sarah was resting in their master bedroom, trying to follow doctor's orders, when her phone began buzzing with urgent text messages. Her bank account had been emptied. Every penny of her personal savings, accumulated over years of careful financial planning, was gone. Jake had somehow gained access to her individual accounts and transferred everything to accounts she couldn't access. Sarah called the bank in a panic, but the customer service representative was unsympathetic. The transfers were made using proper authorization codes and security information. They appear to be legitimate transactions. How is that possible? Those were my personal accounts. Ma'am, when you're married, spouses often have access to each other's financial information. If your husband had your social security number, your mother's maiden name, and knowledge of your transaction history, he could potentially access your accounts. Information that Jake had accumulated over 8 years of marriage. Sarah realized she had never changed her banking passwords or security questions after they were married. She had trusted him completely, and he had used that trust as a weapon against her. With no job and no savings, Sarah couldn't afford her mortgage payments, her car lease, or even basic living expenses. Jake had systematically cut off every source of financial independence she had. When she confronted him about the missing money, his response was chilling in its casual cruelty. "You're going to need excellent legal representation if you want to keep fighting me," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "I figured I'd help you understand the reality of your situation. You stole my life savings. I used marital funds to protect marital assets. My lawyers assure me it's completely legal during divorce proceedings." Sarah felt the baby kick weakly, as if her child could sense the stress radiating through her body. "Jake, I'm supposed to be on bed rest. The doctor said stress could kill our baby." "Your baby," Jake corrected automatically. "We'll know soon enough whether it's mine." The casual dismissal of their child's well-being was what finally broke something fundamental in Sarah's understanding of her husband. This wasn't just about divorce or money or custody. Jake genuinely didn't care if their baby lived or died, as long as he got what he wanted from the legal proceedings. The third catastrophic event was, in many ways, the most devastating because it involved the complete betrayal of someone Sarah had trusted to help her. Her first attorney, Michael Rodriguez, had seemed competent and sympathetic during their initial consultations. He had taken her case on a payment plan, understanding that her finances were limited, and had promised to fight aggressively for her rights. Sarah should have been suspicious when Michael suddenly became difficult to reach. Phone calls went unreturned for days. Meetings were canceled at the last minute. Legal documents were filed late, forcing Sarah to accept unfavorable temporary arrangements. The truth emerged during what Sarah thought was a strategy session in Michael's office. She had dragged herself there despite her doctor's orders, knowing that she needed to actively participate in her defense if she had any hope of protecting her child's future. Michael was nervous throughout the meeting, avoiding eye contact and stumbling over basic legal concepts he had explained clearly during their first consultation. When Sarah pressed him about their trial strategy, he finally admitted the truth. "Mrs. Harrison, I think you should consider accepting your husband's settlement offer. We've talked about this. The offer is completely unreasonable. Given the evidence against you and the complexity of proving digital manipulation, I think it might be your best option. Sarah studied Michael's face, noting his obvious discomfort and evasive answers to her questions. Michael, are you still working for me? The pause before his answer told her everything she needed to know. I've been asked to serve as a mediator between both parties, he said finally. Your husband's legal team approached me about finding a mutually acceptable resolution. You're being paid by Jake. I'm being compensated for my time by both parties, which allows me to maintain objectivity and focus on what's best for everyone involved, including your child. Sarah felt like she was falling through space. Her own attorney had been bought by her husband, explaining why her legal position had deteriorated so rapidly over the past weeks. How much did he pay you? Michael's answer was a number that represented more money than Sarah had made in 2 years at her marketing job. It was also more than enough to ensure that Michael would prioritize Jake's interests over hers in any legal conflict. I'm no longer your attorney, Sarah said, struggling to her feet despite the dizziness that had been plaguing her since her hospitalization. Mrs. Harrison, please consider the settlement. Given your current situation, I don't think you'll find other representation that can match what Mr. Harrison's team can offer. As Sarah left Michael's office, she realized that Jake had systematically eliminated every resource she had: her job, her savings, her legal representation, her health, and nearly her pregnancy itself. He had isolated her completely, making it nearly impossible for her to fight back. But as she sat in her car in the parking lot, feeling the baby move inside her, Sarah remembered something Dr. Valdez had said. The placental abruption was caused by stress, but it was also her body's way of protecting the baby from the toxic environment that had become her life. Her child was fighting to survive, just as she was, and if her baby could fight against impossible odds, so could she. Sarah pulled out her phone and started researching divorce attorneys who specialized in cases involving digital evidence and domestic financial abuse. Jake had won the first round of their war, but he had made one crucial mistake. He had assumed that destroying her resources would destroy her will to fight. Instead, it had simply clarified what she was fighting for, not just her own future, but the future of a child who deserved better than a father who would steal from his pregnant wife and endanger his own baby to win a legal battle. The war was far from over, but Sarah was about to change the rules of engagement entirely. Diane Cooper's second office visit felt different from their first meeting. Sarah arrived using a wheelchair, doctor's orders after her hospitalization, but her eyes held a steely determination that hadn't been there before. I need to tell you something about my previous attorney, Sarah began, explaining Michael Rodriguez's betrayal. Diane's reaction was swift and professional. That's a clear ethical violation. We'll file a complaint with the state bar, but more importantly, it tells us something about Jake's strategy. He's not just fighting dirty, he's fighting desperately. Honorable, what do you mean? Men like your husband, they only resort to corrupting opposing counsel when they're worried about what that counsel might discover. Diane pulled out a thick file folder. I've been doing some research on Harrison Digital Empire while we've been dealing with your medical situation. The folder contained printouts of corporate filings, news articles, and what appeared to be social media posts from other women. Sarah recognized the pattern immediately: young, attractive women who had been in relationships with successful tech entrepreneurs, all reporting similar experiences of digital harassment and reputation destruction. Jake's done this before, Sarah whispered. 3 times that I can document. Always the same pattern: relationship ends. Explicit fake images appear online. The women are painted as unstable and unfaithful. Diane spread the documents across her desk. But here's what's interesting. All 3 women eventually disappeared from social media entirely. No more posts, no more digital presence. He scared them into silence. Or he paid them into silence. Significant settlements with non-disclosure agreements. Diane pointed to a corporate filing. Harrison Digital Empire has a legal expenses budget that's grown by 300% over the past 2 years. That's not normal for a tech company unless they're settling a lot of lawsuits. Sarah felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. So we can prove a pattern of behavior. We can try, but NDAs make it difficult to get the other women to testify. However, I have a better idea. Diane smiled grimly. We're going to use Jake's own technology against him. Diane explained her strategy. Harrison Digital Empire publicly marketed their deepfake detection software as the most advanced in the industry. Their website contained detailed technical explanations of how their AI could identify digitally manipulated content with 99% accuracy. If their technology is as good as they claim, it should be able to prove that the images of you are fake, Diane said. And if they refuse to test them, or if the test results are inconclusive, that creates reasonable doubt about their software's effectiveness. But what if Jake has a way to fool his own detection software? Then we expose that too. Either way, we win. Diane leaned forward. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any possibility that Jake had access to compromising images of you? Any private photos you might have shared during your marriage? Sarah thought carefully. We took some intimate photos early in our marriage, but nothing like what's been posted online. And Jake had access to years of my social media content, so he knows my expressions, my mannerisms, how I pose for photos. That's actually helpful. The more Jake knows about your authentic behavior and appearance, the easier it would be for him to create convincing fakes. His intimate knowledge of you is evidence of his ability to manipulate your digital likeness. As they planned their legal strategy, Diane's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, her expression changing from concentration to surprise. Sarah, someone wants to meet with us. Someone who claims to have information about Harrison Digital Empire's business practices. The meeting was arranged for that evening at a coffee shop in East Austin, far from the tech industry haunts where Jake and his colleagues typically socialized. Sarah arrived in her wheelchair, feeling exposed and vulnerable in public for the first time since the fake images had gone viral. The person waiting for them was not what Sarah expected. Emma Chen was a young software engineer, probably in her mid-20s, with the intense focus that characterized successful tech workers. But her nervousness was immediately apparent. I work for Harrison Digital Empire, Emma began without preamble. I'm one of the developers on their deepfake detection platform. Diane immediately pulled out a legal pad. Before you say anything else, I need to tell you that anything you share with us could potentially be used in legal proceedings. Are you sure you want to continue? Emma nodded. I've been watching what's happening to Mrs. Harrison online. I recognize the technology signatures. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Emma looked around the coffee shop nervously before continuing. Our detection software works by identifying specific artifacts left behind by different AI generation tools. Every deepfake program leaves a unique digital fingerprint, like a signature. And you recognize the signature in the images of me. It's not just that I recognize it, Emma said quietly. It's our signature. The fake images were created using Harrison Digital Empire's proprietary content generation tools. Sarah felt her heart racing despite her doctor's orders to avoid stress. Jake created the images using his own company's technology, not Jake directly. The work was done by our advanced development team, but it would require executive approval for that level of resource allocation. Emma pulled out her phone and showed them a screenshot of internal project codes. This is from our internal development tracker, Project Narrative Control, authorized by CEO Jake Harrison, budgeted for 40 hours of senior developer time. Diane was scribbling notes furiously. Emma, are you willing to testify to this? I'm willing to provide documentation, but I can't testify publicly without losing my job and probably my entire career. Jake has connections throughout the Austin tech scene. What if we could provide you with whistleblower protection? Emma considered this carefully. There might be another way. Our development team has been documenting everything because we were uncomfortable with the project. We knew it felt like corporate espionage or worse. What kind of documentation? Internal emails, project specifications, even test renders showing the progression from initial concept to final fake images. Emma's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Jake ordered us to create a comprehensive fake social media history for Mrs. Harrison, not just a few images, but an entire alternate narrative of her marriage. Sarah felt sick. The scope of Jake's digital assassination was even worse than she had imagined. He hadn't just created a few fake images to embarrass her. He had commissioned an entire alternate reality designed to rewrite the history of their relationship. How many people know about this project? Diane asked. The core development team is 5 people. 3 of them have already started updating their resumes because they're uncomfortable with the direction the company is heading. Emma looked directly at Sarah. Mrs. Harrison, your husband has been using company resources to destroy the reputations of multiple women. You're not the first, and I don't think you'll be the last. Can you get us copies of the documentation? Emma nodded. I've already been copying files to a secure external drive. If something happens to me, or if I get fired, at least the evidence will exist. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt a cautious optimism that she hadn't experienced in weeks. For the first time since this nightmare began, she had concrete evidence of Jake's crimes and allies willing to help her expose them. But Emma's final warning tempered her hope with a dose of reality. Mrs. Harrison, Jake knows that I've been asking questions about project narrative control. He's suspicious of anyone who seems too interested in the technical details. Emma gathered her things quickly. Be very careful about who you trust. Jake has resources and connections that most people can't imagine. He's not just fighting to win your divorce. He's fighting to protect a business model built on destroying people's digital lives. As Sarah and Diane drove home through the Austin night, Sarah realized that she wasn't just fighting for custody of her child anymore. She was fighting to expose a systematic operation that used cutting-edge technology to destroy women who had become inconvenient to powerful men. Jake had made the mistake of targeting someone who refused to be silently destroyed. And now his entire digital empire was about to face scrutiny from someone who understood exactly what he had done and why. The second phase of their war was about to begin, but this time, Sarah wouldn't be fighting alone. The paternity test results arrived on a Thursday morning that started with Sarah throwing up from morning sickness intensified by stress. She had been on strict bed rest for 2 weeks, following doctor's orders while Diane coordinated their legal strategy from Sarah's home office. Jake had insisted on an independent laboratory and chain of custody protocols that would prevent any claims of tampering. Sarah had agreed immediately, confident in her fidelity and eager to remove any doubt about her child's paternity. The sealed envelope felt heavier than it should have as Diane opened it in Sarah's bedroom, with Sarah propped up against pillows to minimize stress on her pregnancy. The results show a 99.97% probability that Jake Harrison is the biological father, Diane read aloud. Sarah felt a wave of vindication followed immediately by anger. So after everything he's put me through, after nearly causing me to lose our baby with stress, he is the father, just like I said all along. This is actually better than we hoped, Diane replied. The paternity test proves your honesty while highlighting Jake's willingness to put his own child at risk to win a legal battle. Judge Williams is not going to react well to that. But before they could fully process the implications of the paternity results, Diane's phone rang with a call that would change everything about their case. Mr. Cooper, this is Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. We need to discuss Harrison Digital Empire and your client's situation. The FBI had been investigating Harrison Digital Empire for 3 months as part of a larger operation targeting technology companies that created non-consensual intimate imagery. What started as a routine investigation into revenge porn operations had uncovered something much more systematic and profitable. Agent Martinez arrived at Sarah's house within 2 hours, accompanied by Agent David Park, a digital forensics specialist. Both agents were younger than Sarah had expected, probably in their early 30s, but they carried themselves with the confidence of people who understood the technology they were investigating. Mrs. Harrison, you're not the first woman to be targeted by your husband's operation, Agent Martinez began, but you might be the key to shutting down the entire network. Agent Park opened a laptop and showed them a presentation that made Sarah's blood run cold. Harrison Digital Empire wasn't just creating fake images for personal revenge. They were running a sophisticated operation that generated fake content for anyone willing to pay their fees. Vindictive ex-husbands, abusive partners, even business competitors, Agent Park explained. Harrison Digital Empire has been creating comprehensive fake digital histories for clients across the country. They call it reputation management, but it's actually systematic character assassination using artificial intelligence. The financial scope was staggering. The FBI had traced over $2 million in revenue from fake content creation over the past 18 months. Jake's company had perfected a business model that monetized domestic abuse and harassment. The technical sophistication is remarkable, Agent Martinez continued. They don't just create fake images. They create entire fake social media histories, complete with timestamps, location data, and interaction patterns that appear authentic to casual investigation. How many women have been targeted? Sarah asked. We've identified 47 victims so far, but we suspect there are many more. Most victims never report the crimes because they're too embarrassed or they don't realize the images are fake. Diane leaned forward with obvious interest. What kind of evidence do you have? Agent Park turned his laptop around to show them a complex flowchart. We've been tracking digital payments, server logs, and communication patterns. We also have a cooperating witness inside the company. Sarah's heart jumped. Emma Chen. We can't confirm the identity of our cooperating witness, but we can tell you that we have detailed documentation of Harrison Digital Empire's internal processes, including the project specifically targeting you. The agents explained that Sarah's case was particularly valuable to their investigation because Jake had made several crucial mistakes. By using his company's resources to target his own wife, he had created a clear paper trail connecting the fake content to his personal motivations. Most importantly, he had involved multiple employees in the creation process, creating witnesses to his crimes. We're prepared to offer you full federal protection and support, Agent Martinez said, but we need your cooperation in building our case against the entire operation. What does that mean exactly? Diane asked. Mrs. Harrison would need to testify publicly about her experiences, which would expose the technical methods used against her. That testimony would help us establish patterns of behavior that apply to dozens of other victims. Sarah felt the baby move inside her, a reminder of what she was fighting for. If I testify, will it help the other women Jake has hurt? Your testimony could be the key to shutting down the entire operation and bringing federal charges against everyone involved. The decision felt enormous. Sarah had been trying to handle her divorce quietly, to protect her privacy and her child's future. But cooperating with the FBI would make her case completely public and turn her personal trauma into evidence in a federal criminal investigation. There's something else, Agent Park added. We believe Harrison Digital Empire has been working with other companies to expand their operations nationally. Your case isn't just about revenge. It's about dismantling a technology platform that's being used to abuse women across the country. Diane studied the FBI's documentation carefully. What charges are you pursuing? Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit cybercrime, violation of federal revenge porn statutes, and potentially racketeering if we can prove organized criminal enterprise. Agent Martinez's voice was matter-of-fact. Jake Harrison is looking at significant federal prison time. As the agents prepared to leave, they provided Sarah with additional security measures for her home and communication devices. The investigation was entering a phase where Jake would become increasingly desperate, making him potentially dangerous to witnesses and cooperating parties. Mrs. Harrison, your husband has built his entire business on the assumption that his victims would be too ashamed or too isolated to fight back, Agent Martinez said. You're the first victim who has the resources and determination to expose the entire operation. After the agents left, Sarah and Diane sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. The scope of Jake's crimes was far beyond what either of them had imagined, but it also meant that Sarah's personal fight had become something much larger and more important. If I do this, Jake goes to federal prison, Sarah said finally. If you do this, Jake stops hurting other women, Diane replied. But Sarah, you need to understand that cooperation with federal prosecutors means your case becomes public record. Every detail of what Jake did to you will be part of court documents that anyone can access. Sarah looked down at her growing belly, thinking about the child who would grow up either with a father in federal prison or with a father who had gotten away with systematically destroying women's lives for profit. My baby deserves to grow up in a world where people like Jake face consequences for their actions, she said, and those other women deserve justice. Then we cooperate with the FBI, and we prepare for Jake to fight back with everything he has. Sarah nodded, understanding that her decision would escalate their conflict into something far more dangerous than a typical divorce battle. But she also understood that she was no longer fighting just for herself and her child. She was fighting to dismantle a system that turned domestic abuse into a profitable technology business. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she was on the right side of a fight that mattered to more people than just her own family. The war between Sarah and Jake was about to become a federal case, and Jake Harrison was about to learn that some opponents couldn't be destroyed with artificial intelligence and fake images. The courtroom live stream had over 50,000 viewers when Judge Patricia Williams called the session to order. Word had leaked that the Harrison divorce case involved federal criminal charges, turning what should have been a private family matter into a public spectacle. Sarah arrived in a wheelchair, flanked by FBI agents and followed by news cameras that captured every moment of her entrance. At 34 weeks pregnant, she looked fragile but determined, wearing a simple navy dress that emphasized her condition rather than hiding it. Jake sat at the defendant's table with his expanded legal team, now including federal criminal defense attorneys in addition to his divorce lawyers. He looked composed and confident, the successful tech entrepreneur dealing with an unfortunate personal matter. Amber Sterling was notably absent from the gallery, having distanced herself from Jake once news of the federal investigation became public. Her Instagram account had been scrubbed of any photos with Jake, and she had posted a carefully worded statement about supporting victims of digital abuse. Judge Williams was clearly frustrated with the media attention surrounding the case. This court will not tolerate disruptions from spectators or attempts to turn these proceedings into entertainment, she announced sternly. We are here to determine child custody and marital asset division, not to conduct a criminal trial. Jake's lead attorney, Marcus Webb, stood to address the court first. His strategy was immediately apparent: paint Sarah as an unstable woman whose federal cooperation was motivated by vindictiveness rather than justice. Your Honor, my client Jake Harrison has been subjected to a campaign of harassment disguised as criminal investigation. Mrs. Harrison has made wild accusations about deepfake technology and corporate conspiracies, but she has provided no credible evidence to support these claims. Webb presented the fake images of Sarah as if they were authentic, arguing that her claims of digital manipulation were desperate attempts to avoid taking responsibility for her own behavior. The FBI's investigation has found no evidence of wrongdoing by Harrison Digital Empire or my client personally. Webb continued, what they have found is a woman so determined to destroy her husband's reputation that she has involved federal law enforcement in her personal vendetta was a masterful performance, designed to make Sarah look like she was abusing the legal system to get revenge on her successful husband. Sarah felt her blood pressure rising as Webb systematically dismantled her credibility and painted Jake as the victim of a vindictive ex-wife. But Diane Cooper had prepared for exactly this strategy. When she stood to present Sarah's case, she began with a simple question that changed the entire trajectory of the hearing. Your Honor, I would like to request that Harrison Digital Empire's deepfake detection software be used to analyze the explicit images that form the basis of Mr. Harrison's accusations against my client. Webb objected immediately. Your Honor, this is a transparent phishing expedition. My client's proprietary technology cannot be compelled for use in civil proceedings. Actually, it can, Judge Williams replied. Mr. Webb, your client has made these images central to his case against Mrs. Harrison. If Harrison Digital Empire's technology can determine their authenticity, then justice requires that analysis to be performed. Jake's composed expression flickered for the first time. Sarah watched as he leaned over to whisper urgently with his attorneys, his face showing the first signs of genuine concern. Diane pressed her advantage. Your Honor, Harrison Digital Empire publicly claims their software can detect deep fakes with 99% accuracy. If these images are authentic, as Mr. Harrison claims, his own technology should confirm that immediately. And if the images are fake, Judge Williams asked, then we'll know that Mr. Harrison has committed perjury by presenting fabricated evidence to this court. The courtroom erupted in murmurs from the gallery and frantic typing from reporters. Jake's legal team requested an immediate recess to discuss their position, but Judge Williams denied the request. Mr. Webb, your client built his business reputation on the reliability of his technology. Either that technology works as advertised, or it doesn't. We're going to find out which. What happened next exceeded even Diane's most optimistic expectations. As Harrison Digital Empire's technical team set up their detection software in the courtroom, FBI Agent Park quietly approached the bench with new evidence. Your Honor, we have additional documentation that has just become available through our ongoing federal investigation. Agent Park presented the court with Emma Chen's internal documentation of Project Narrative Control, including emails directly from Jake Harrison, authorizing the creation of fake content targeting his own wife. Jake's face went ashen as the emails were read into the record. His communications were clinical and detailed, treating the destruction of Sarah's reputation as a technical problem to be solved with appropriate resource allocation. Create comprehensive fake social media history showing pattern of infidelity. One email read, "Timeline should begin 6 months before pregnancy announcement to establish premeditation." Another email was even more damaging. "Ensure technical quality is sufficient to fool casual investigation, but not sophisticated analysis. We want plausible deniability, not perfect deception." Sarah watched her husband's carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. The successful entrepreneur image gave way to something much darker as the scope of his planning became clear. But Jake's legal team had one final gambit. Webb stood up with obvious desperation and made an announcement that stunned everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, my client wishes to change his plea and admit to creating the false images, but he maintains that his actions were justified by Mrs. Harrison's actual infidelity, which the images accurately represent." It was a Hail Mary attempt to maintain some version of Jake's accusations while acknowledging the fake nature of his evidence. He was essentially arguing that he had created fake images of real events, hoping to avoid perjury charges while keeping alive his claims about Sarah's character. Diane was on her feet immediately. "Your Honor, Mr. Harrison is now admitting to felony creation of non-consensual, intimate imagery while making additional, unsubstantiated accusations against my client. This is exactly the kind of manipulation and gaslighting that federal investigators have documented as his standard pattern of behavior." Judge Williams had clearly reached the end of her patience with Jake's legal maneuvering. "Mr. Harrison, you have admitted to creating false evidence and presenting it to this court as authentic. You have also admitted to using your company's resources to systematically destroy your pregnant wife's reputation." Sarah felt her baby kick strongly, as if responding to the stress and excitement in the courtroom. But for the first time in months, the baby's movement felt like celebration rather than distress. "Furthermore," Judge Williams continued, "the court notes that Mr. Harrison's actions have endangered the health of his pregnant wife and unborn child, as documented by her recent hospitalization for stress-related complications." Jake finally seemed to realize the magnitude of his situation. The federal charges were bad enough, but his performance in family court had destroyed any possibility of winning custody or a favorable divorce settlement. As Judge Williams prepared to rule on temporary custody and support arrangements, Sarah felt a profound sense of vindication. Jake's technological advantages and financial resources hadn't been enough to overcome the simple truth of what he had done to her. But even in victory, Sarah knew this was just the beginning. Federal prosecutors were building a criminal case that would take months to resolve, and Jake would undoubtedly appeal every aspect of the family court's rulings. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, Sarah was winning decisively. And more importantly, she was winning publicly, in a way that would help other women recognize and fight similar forms of digital abuse. As the court recessed, Sarah looked back at the gallery filled with reporters and supporters who had followed her story. Her personal trauma had become a public battle against a form of abuse that most people hadn't even known existed. She was no longer just fighting for her own child's future. She was fighting to expose a technology-enabled form of domestic violence that threatened women everywhere. The FBI raid on Harrison Digital Empire happened at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after Jake's courtroom admission. Sarah watched the news coverage from her hospital bed, where she had been admitted for monitoring after her blood pressure spiked during a follow-up legal meeting. Jake was arrested at his office, surrounded by federal agents and news cameras that captured his walk of shame in handcuffs. The successful tech entrepreneur, who had built his career on projecting control and confidence, looked small and defeated as he was led away from the company he had spent years building. The federal indictment was comprehensive and devastating. Jake faced charges of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit cybercrimes, violation of federal revenge porn statutes, and racketeering. The government alleged that Harrison Digital Empire had operated as a criminal enterprise designed to profit from domestic abuse and harassment. But the most shocking revelation came from the FBI's analysis of the company's servers. Jake hadn't just targeted Sarah. He had been creating fake content to destroy women for over 2 years, building a sophisticated operation that generated millions of dollars in revenue from what prosecutors called digital assassination services. The other victims began coming forward within days of Jake's arrest. Women from across the country shared similar stories, relationships that ended badly, followed by the appearance of explicit fake images that destroyed their reputations and careers. Many had never realized the images were artificially created, assuming they were victims of traditional revenge porn. Sarah's hospital room became an informal command center for coordinating with federal prosecutors and other victims. Despite her doctor's orders to minimize stress, Sarah felt compelled to help other women understand what had happened to them and how they could seek justice. "Mrs. Harrison, you probably saved my life," wrote one woman from Seattle. "I was ready to commit suicide because I thought those images of me were real, and I couldn't understand how my ex-husband had obtained them. Knowing they're fake gives me hope that I can rebuild my reputation." The financial investigation revealed the full scope of Jake's crimes. He had been charging clients between $50,000 and $200,000 for comprehensive reputation management services that included creating fake evidence of infidelity, financial misconduct, and other character-damaging behavior. Harrison Digital Empire's client list read like a directory of wealthy men seeking to escape expensive divorces, custody battles, and business partnerships. Jake had built his fortune by monetizing domestic abuse, turning artificial intelligence into a weapon against women who had become inconvenient to powerful men. Emma Chen emerged as the federal government's star witness, providing detailed documentation of the company's criminal activities and testifying about Jake's personal involvement in every aspect of the fake content creation process. Jake Harrison didn't just authorize these projects, Emma told federal prosecutors. He personally directed the technical specifications and reviewed the final products to ensure they met his standards for destroying his targets' reputations. The revelation that perhaps hurt Sarah the most was the discovery of Jake's long-term planning. FBI analysis of his communications showed that he had been planning to divorce Sarah and destroy her reputation since before she became pregnant. Her pregnancy had simply accelerated his timeline, not changed his fundamental intentions. Jake had never loved her, not in any way that Sarah understood love. She had been a useful asset during the early years of his company's growth, providing social connections and professional credibility that helped him raise investment capital. But once Harrison Digital Empire was established, Sarah had become a liability in Jake's calculation. The fake images weren't crimes of passion or revenge. They were business decisions, implemented with the same cold efficiency that Jake brought to every other aspect of his corporate strategy. As Sarah processed the full scope of Jake's betrayal, she also had to prepare for the most important testimony of her life. Federal prosecutors had scheduled her appearance as their lead witness in the government's case against Jake and his co-conspirators. The testimony would be public, broadcast live, and covered extensively by national media. Sarah's personal trauma would become evidence in a federal criminal trial that could send Jake to prison for decades. But it would also help prosecutors shut down a criminal enterprise that had victimized dozens of women and could have victimized hundreds more if allowed to continue operating. Dr. Patricia Valdez was concerned about the stress of public testimony on Sarah's pregnancy, but she also understood the importance of Sarah's role in the federal case. "Your blood pressure is elevated, and you're showing signs of preterm labor risk," Dr. Valdez explained during a consultation. "But your pregnancy is now at 36 weeks. If you go into labor during or after your testimony, we can safely deliver your baby." Sarah's child would be born into a world where her father was in federal prison, but it would also be a world where his crimes had been exposed and stopped. Other children would be protected from the kind of systematic destruction that Jake had unleashed against vulnerable women. 3 days before her scheduled federal testimony, Sarah went into labor. The contractions started during a strategy session with federal prosecutors in her hospital room. Agent Martinez was explaining the timeline for Jake's sentencing when Sarah doubled over with pain that cut through her words like a knife. "Get Dr. Valdez," Sarah managed between contractions. "The baby's coming." The birth was swift but complicated. Sarah's stress-induced high blood pressure required an emergency cesarean section, performed while FBI agents waited outside the operating room and news crews gathered in the hospital parking lot. When Sarah woke up from surgery, she was holding her son for the first time. He was small but healthy, weighing 5 pounds and 14 ounces, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with intense curiosity. "He looks like you," Diane said softly, standing beside Sarah's bed. Nothing like his father. Sarah studied her son's face, searching for any resemblance to Jake. But the baby looked entirely like her side of the family, with her father's strong jaw and her mother's expressive eyes. His name is David, Sarah announced. David Martinez Harrison. He'll use my maiden name as his primary surname. David would grow up knowing the truth about his father, but he would also grow up with a mother who had refused to be destroyed by that truth. Sarah's decision to fight back had not only saved her own life, it had saved the lives of dozens of other women and prevented the abuse of countless future victims. The federal case against Jake proceeded even without Sarah's in-person testimony. Her recorded deposition, combined with Emma Chen's documentation and the FBI's technical evidence, was sufficient to secure conviction on all major charges. Jake Harrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to 47 documented victims. Harrison Digital Empire was dissolved, its assets seized to fund victim compensation and law enforcement training programs. The other co-conspirators received lesser sentences in exchange for cooperation, but they were all banned from working in technology industries and required to register as cyber offenders. Amber Sterling faced her own legal troubles when the FBI discovered that she had been an active participant in Jake's operation, helping to identify and target other women for digital destruction. Her social media empire collapsed when her followers learned that she had profited from the systematic abuse of vulnerable women, 2 years after David's birth. Sarah stood in the auditorium at the University of Texas at Austin, preparing to deliver a keynote speech about digital abuse and artificial intelligence ethics. The room was packed with students, faculty, and technology professionals who had come to hear from the woman who had exposed one of the first major AI-enabled domestic violence operations. Sarah had rebuilt her life completely in those 2 years. The $25 million settlement from Jake's criminal asset forfeiture had allowed her to start the Digital Justice Foundation, a nonprofit organization that helped victims of technology-enabled abuse and advocated for stronger legal protections against AI-generated harassment. Her work had led to federal legislation requiring disclosure labels on artificial intelligence-generated content and criminal penalties for creating non-consensual intimate imagery using any technology. The Sarah Harrison Act, as it became known, was considered landmark legislation in the fight against digital abuse. But more importantly for Sarah personally, she had found genuine happiness and peace in her new life. David was a healthy, curious toddler who loved books and building blocks and had never asked about his father. Sarah had been honest about Jake's absence without sharing details that a young child couldn't understand. Daddy made some bad choices that hurt people, so he has to live somewhere else for a long time. Sarah had explained when David first asked, "But you have Mommy and Grandma and Grandpa and lots of people who love you very much." Sarah's parents had moved to Austin to help care for David while Sarah built her nonprofit and completed law school. She had decided to become an attorney herself, specializing in technology law and victim advocacy. The personal cost of her victory had been significant. Sarah still struggled with anxiety and trust issues stemming from Jake's systematic psychological abuse. She had been in therapy consistently since David's birth, working to understand how she had been manipulated and ensuring that she could recognize similar patterns in the future. Dating felt impossible. How could she trust anyone new when the man she had loved most completely had turned out to be capable of such calculated cruelty? Sarah had decided to focus on David and her work, leaving romantic relationships for some theoretical future when she felt ready to be vulnerable again. But as Sarah looked out at the audience waiting to hear her speech, she felt a deep sense of purpose and accomplishment that had nothing to do with romantic love or marriage. She had turned her personal trauma into a mission that was helping other women and changing how society thought about technology and abuse. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. Sarah began her speech. I was pregnant, isolated, and being systematically destroyed by someone who was supposed to love me. I had no job, no money, and no idea how to fight back against technology I didn't understand. The audience was completely silent, absorbed in her story. But I learned something important during that experience. The same technology that can be used to destroy lives can also be used to save them. The artificial intelligence that created fake images of me also created the digital evidence that sent my abuser to prison. Sarah talked about the importance of digital literacy, the need for legal reforms, and the responsibility of technology companies to consider the potential abuse applications of their innovations. But she also talked about resilience, community support, and the power of refusing to be silently destroyed by people who wielded technology as a weapon. Every woman who speaks out against digital abuse makes it easier for the next woman to be believed. Sarah concluded, every prosecutor who takes these cases seriously makes it more likely that the next victim will see justice. Every technology company that builds ethical safeguards into their products helps protect vulnerable people from abuse. The standing ovation lasted several minutes, but what moved Sarah most were the individual conversations afterward. Young women who had experienced similar abuse, technology workers who wanted to build better safeguards into their products, and law enforcement officers who were learning to investigate digital crimes. Sarah's personal tragedy had become a catalyst for systemic change that was protecting countless other women from similar experiences. As Sarah drove home that evening, she passed the building that had once housed Harrison Digital Empire. It was now occupied by a cybersecurity firm that specialized in protecting victims of online harassment. The irony wasn't lost on her that Jake's former office space was now being used to fight exactly the kind of crimes he had committed. At home, David was playing with blocks in the living room while Sarah's mother prepared dinner. The house was warm and filled with the sounds of family life that Sarah had once thought she might lose forever. Mommy, David ran to hug her legs as she walked in. I built a castle. Sarah knelt down to admire his architectural creation, a tower of colorful blocks that seemed to defy gravity through pure toddler determination. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Tell me about how you built it. As David explained his construction process with the serious intensity that two-year-olds brought to important projects, Sarah felt a profound gratitude for the life they had built together. Jake Harrison had tried to erase her completely, to rewrite her story and steal her future. Instead, his crimes had revealed a form of abuse that society hadn't even recognized, leading to legal and social changes that would protect women for generations to come. Sarah's story had become larger than her personal trauma. It had become a testament to the power of refusing to be silently destroyed, of fighting back against abuse even when the technology seemed overwhelmingly sophisticated, and of turning personal pain into social progress. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter forwarded through the federal prison system. Jake was requesting a meeting to discuss David and to apologize for his actions. Sarah read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. She had built a good life for herself and David, one based on truth and genuine love, rather than manipulation and control. Jake's desire for contact was irrelevant to their future. David would grow up knowing that his mother had fought for justice and won. He would grow up in a world where technology companies faced real consequences for enabling abuse, where law enforcement understood digital crimes, and where victims of AI-generated harassment had legal remedies that didn't exist before his mother's case. Most importantly, David would grow up understanding that love meant protection and support, not control and destruction. He would never have to wonder whether the people who claimed to love him were actually plotting his downfall. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Diane, now a close friend as well as her former attorney. Saw the news coverage of your speech? I'm proud of you. Jake's conviction just got upheld on appeal. No chance of early release. Sarah smiled and deleted the message. Jake Harrison's legal situation was no longer her concern. Her concern was the future she was building with David, the women she was helping through her foundation, and the changes she was creating in how society understood and responded to technology-enabled abuse. The war that had begun with fake images and custody battles had ended with federal legislation and systematic reform. Sarah had not only survived Jake's attempt to destroy her, she had used his crimes as the foundation for a career dedicated to ensuring that other women would have better tools to fight back against similar abuse. As she tucked David into bed that night, he asked his usual question, "Tell me a story, Mommy." "Once upon a time," Sarah began, "there was a brave woman who refused to give up, even when very bad people tried to hurt her. And because she was so brave, she was able to protect lots of other people and build a beautiful life with her little boy." "What happened to the bad people?" David asked sleepily. "They had to go away for a very long time, so they couldn't hurt anyone else." "Good," David said definitively. "Bad people shouldn't hurt good people." As Sarah kissed David goodnight and turned off his bedroom light, She reflected on how much their lives had changed since that terrible day in the courtroom when she had collapsed from stress and fear. She had thought her life was ending, but it had actually been beginning. The woman who had been destroyed by Jake Harrison's digital weapons had been reborn as someone stronger, smarter, and more purposeful than she had ever been before. Sarah Martinez had won more than a divorce case or a custody battle. She had won the right to define her own story, to protect her child's future, and to ensure that other women would have better weapons to fight back against the technology-enabled abuse that she had helped expose. The pregnant woman who had fainted in court had become the architect of legal and social changes that would protect vulnerable people for decades to come. And that transformation, Sarah knew, was worth every moment of the pain that had made it necessary. If Sarah's incredible journey from victim to victor moved you, if her fight against impossible odds inspired you, or if you learned something new about the dark side of artificial intelligence, show your support by hitting that like button right now. This story matters because it's happening to women everywhere, but most of them don't have the resources Sarah had to fight back. By sharing this video, you're helping spread awareness about digital abuse that could literally save someone's life. Drop a comment below. What shocked you most about Jake's operation? Have you ever wondered if something you saw online might be fake? Your engagement helps YouTube show this important story to more people who need to hear it. And if you want to stay updated on more incredible real-life dramas where justice prevails against impossible odds, subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're building a community of people who believe the truth always finds a way to win, even when it's buried under layers of artificial intelligence and lies. Remember, Sarah's story started with her refusing to give up when everyone else would have. Sometimes the most ordinary people become extraordinary heroes simply by refusing to accept injustice. Your support helps us tell more stories like this one. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, because real stories of courage deserve real recognition. Retry.